Thank you all for coming. I'm really excited to kick off our teacher toolbox with the first little presentation. So I'm going to talk to you today about what I call Structured Socratic Seminar. That's just kind of something I created over the years based off of me wanting to have a more structured format for discussion. When I first started teaching, I was just terrified of discussion. I thought, I'm sure this will be surprising, but I really like things to be very structured. I don't like chaos. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just giving them free rein to just talk, and it could go wrong in so many ways. So this is kind of me finding that middle balance between the structure and the freedom. So a couple of goals today. I want you to feel confident about doing this in your class with your students, and then have a successful seminar that makes you want to do it again. So my main reason for this entire, activity is that it's very student focused. I really don't talk during Socratic Seminar after I've introduced it. I get to sit back and listen, which can be hard for us as teachers. We probably don't care too much about the Common Core because we have our own standards, but it does address a lot of the Common Core standards that I think get left out, those speaking and listening skills that sometimes, we're addressing them kind of on the fly, but we're not really planning things to address them. And so this kind of gets at that heart. And I think it really allows other kids to shine. The kids who love to talk, that you're constantly like, sit down, be quiet, follow the rules, do this. Those kids finally get to jump in and let their personalities shine. A lot of times you'll see the students that are constantly getting on your nerves or who aren't doing very well, they love Socratic Seminar, and you just get so many great ideas from them. And the structured format gives you some accountability, some fairness. If you're going to be spending a good chunk of class time on it, you want it to be accountable. And my kids love it. They ask to do it again. Like, how often do your kids actually ask you, can we do that again? Like, really? Okay. So to set up for a Socratic Seminar, I make a Socratic Seminar kit. Now it's in a shoebox. It used to be in like an old Twizzlers box for probably 10 years, then I finally upgraded. But it is cups, plastic cups, clear cups are the best, and then I use Army Men. Why? Because I had some in my closet because I'm a pack rat. And so I think this is maybe my second year of teaching that I was like, I'm going to use these as some kind of chips. So you need some kind of chips. Army Men are great because you can get them at the dollar store and you really only need one pack. And also they stand up so you can see them on the table. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But you could use just about anything. Those little pom-poms, glass beads. One time I didn't have the Army Men with me and I used Fruit Loops. So you could do that. It's kind of gross, but so the tools help to provide that tangible structure and accountability. And I'll show you how that works in just a minute. But I keep this in my little shoebox. I think it cost me maybe $1 or $2 for the Army Men and $2 for the cups. And then I've been using these same Army Men since I started teaching when I was 23 years old, I think. All right, so you set up your classroom with an inner and an outer circle. I like to actually move the desks. So I have a small inner circle, and I use about 1/3 of my kids. So in my class, that's probably about 6 kids, 6, 7, maybe 8 kids. And then the rest of them, I have them move their desks into the outer circle. You can set this up for them in advance, or most of the time I just have the kids move the desks. And then I have my Socratic Seminar kit ready. So that's what I do to physically set up the room. And stop me if you have questions or if I'm going too fast, but I might answer your questions as we go along. So I also have a topic in mind, and there are a couple of ways to do this because I know not everyone's an English teacher, but you can do this in just about any classroom, I think. I love an opinionaire. If you've got a topic that's kind of controversial, like maybe a science topic about ecology, you can ask them how they feel about certain statements, and they can rank yes, somewhat, no. If it's for, gosh, I don't know, civics would be an easy one for sure. to do an opinionaire. You could do a quick write or a Collins writing type 1 about a topic. You could ask them some questions that they want to answer during the unit. I like to do it usually during a novel. That's a natural fit for my class and probably for 7th grade English. So I have some essential questions about the novel, but you could have essential questions about the topic. You could have essential questions about themselves and their, goals. You could have, all kinds of essential questions. But I have a couple of questions planned ahead of time that I want them to answer during the seminar. Yeah.
Could this be a debate?
It could absolutely be a debate. It's kind of between a discussion and a debate. So you're supporting your ideas with facts, but you're not like going at each other's throats. There's no like winner or loser like a debate necessarily, but it is a form of debate. So a controversial topic works well because everybody gets a turn to talk. That talking is very measured, so it can't be just, one person opening their mouth and scaring everyone else. So I kind of like that. And then I do a little handout that I call a Socratic prep sheet, and I'll give you guys that in a little bit so you can adapt it. You can do student-created questions. That could work well. Favorite quotes. It works great with an article. If you've got an article about something that you're teaching, you can have them read the article and then talk about it in this format. So the Socratic prep sheet is the preparation, and I have them do that before the discussion. I'm going to show you what that looks like on the next slide too. So it provides a little bit of a sense of security for your quiet kids. They like having something in front of them where they can look at it and speak whatever's on there. And I always tell them, you can just read your quote that you wrote down. If you're really nervous, you can ask your question that you wrote down. And most of the time, they come up with things and they don't even read what's on their sheet. But it does provide that sense of security. You're not going into this totally blind. You're not trying to think of things on the fly. You've got it in front of you. They can do that before, the day before. That's what I usually like to do. They could do it as homework. They might not all do it, so that's a little bit of a risk, or even right before the activity if it's quick. So that's just meant to be some very quick prep work so that everybody feels secure about the seminar. And then I always give them an outer circle notes sheet. I want them to be doing something in the outer circle physically, not just listening. So I would say it's active listening. Whenever I've had them just sit, they tend to get off task or they get antsy, so that gives them a little bit of accountability. They don't have to be writing the entire time, but it gives them a little bit to write about. So, and I'll give you a sample of what I use that you can adapt, but it could be anything. With my seniors, sometimes I just say take notes, and that can be whatever, that means to them. So they can record some of the insightful comments that people do, they can come up with questions, all kinds of things. So I know it's kind of small, but this is what the prep sheet looks like. Like this is for To Kill a Mockingbird. Here's my big questions. I put some quotes that I like, and then I have them come up with 3 quotes from the novel, 2 questions, and 1 personal connection. So they're not writing very much. They're just writing a couple things. And then on the back of that, I have a little graphic organizer, and this is their outer circle notes. So they have to write down insightful comments, things I wish I had said, new questions, my answers to the big questions. So, and you can adapt that to whatever you want, or you could even just say, take notes. Okay, when I get ready to train my kids for the seminar, I do introduce the idea ahead of time, like at least a day or 2 ahead of time, especially because you're going to have those kids who get very anxious about this, especially when you tell them that it's graded. And I was that kid when I was in high school. I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get graded on a seminar. What's it going to be? And I would have 80,000 questions for the teacher and probably drive her crazy. But if you introduce it ahead of time, they can kind of mentally prepare themselves. You can answer their questions about it if you feel like they're going to be nervous. But I think that really helps. And I do share that it's going to be graded. And usually I do a positive spin like, this is going to be a grade, but it's what I call a gimme. If you just talk during the discussion and you pay attention, you're going to get a really easy 100. This is great. So I kind of spin it like that. And I also share that everyone's going to be accountable for speaking a certain number of times. Some kids will think, oh, a discussion, great. I can sit here and Erin will talk the whole time and I won't have to say anything. I'll just nod and I'll get a 100, right? And that's not how this works. And then Erin might be like, oh, I got this. I'm going to talk the whole time. I've got all these ideas. So letting them know ahead of time that you're going to have to talk and you're going to have to listen is really good. So the inner circle rules. The kids who are in the inner circle, they're the ones who are actually having the discussion at any given time. So you've got about 6 to 8 kids. They're sitting in a circle. They're talking to each other, so they're not talking to the teacher. And I might have to remind them of that. Sometimes they'll be like looking out at me, and I'm like, nope, look at the people you're talking to. And I tell them there's no raising hands. I don't want you to raise your hand. I want you to have a discussion. When you're sitting at lunch and you're talking, you're not like, how was your day today? Now it is your turn. How was your day today? What is your favorite item of lunch? Like, that's not how we talk to each other. So you can just tell them no raising hands. You decide the order, the flow of discussion. We're not taking turns. We're having a discussion. And I tell them that I'm going to try not to talk. It's not always possible. Sometimes I jump in. But when you're finished talking, you're going to put your chip in the cup to signal that you're done. So depending on how many comments you want them to have, usually I do 3 or 4, you're going to have your Army men in the cup ahead of time. Let me see. Oops. So maybe we're in the discussion over here, Deb and me and Diane, right? So we're going to dump out our Army men. We're going to set them up on the table. So these are my 4 comments. Did I miscount? Sorry. These are my 4 comments, or your 3 comments. And I say something just brilliant, and when I'm finished speaking, I'm signaling that I'm done by putting my guy in the cup. And then Diane jumps in and she says something really interesting to everyone, and she puts hers in the cup. And then Deb maybe asks a great question and she puts hers in the cup. And then I say something again and I put mine in the cup. And then Deb jumps back in, she puts hers in the cup. And we've got multiple people. And then I say 2 more things and I put mine in the cup and making it go faster. Okay, now I'm out of Army men. So I'm going to leave them here. I've spoken my 4 comments. They're going to keep talking. They keep the discussion going. I'm going to quietly get up out of my chair and I'm going to go sit in the outer circle. And then somebody from the outer circle, doesn't matter who, is going to go sit down. They're going to dump out the Army men, and then they're going to join the discussion. And it keeps going during that time, so it never stops. A couple of things that I do tell them, there's no interrupting. That's very important, and that is something that I will actually stop the discussion and say, hey, make sure that Shannon gets a chance to finish speaking before she puts her chip in the cup, because that's her grade. She only gets that opportunity to get those points. I tell them their comments should be nice and meaty, right? It should be about a paragraph of talk before you put your guy in the cup. You don't want to just say, I agree, right? Like, that's not worth a bunch of points. And then when all the chips are gone, they quietly slip out of their seat. The outer circle, they're listening and writing, so there's no talking. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
How does the story perpetually keep going forward then if I'm going to bring in from the outer circle? Because if I've already got my comments that I wanted to ask or my points that I wanted to make, someone else might have made that point. Do I adapt the outer circle rewrite, or do I re-bring up and revalidate that point?
It could be both. You could bring it up in a new way. You can always say, hey, can we go back to this point that Shannon made earlier because I have something to add. You could bring it up in a different way. Ideally, you want to use a topic that's a nice meaty topic that there's going to be plenty to talk about. So if we're talking about a novel, there's plenty to talk about, right? If you're talking about maybe one of the plays that you're doing and the themes in the play, or maybe you're talking about acting techniques, there's going to be, you want to choose a big topic, so there's plenty to say. But that's a great question. So they're going to be listening and writing, and they might be coming up with more ideas too while they're in the outer circle that they want to say when they come in. They're filling out the notes page and listening, and then when someone leaves, they quietly move to the open seat. They dump out the cup, they join the discussion. I do have to tell them, don't tackle people. Sometimes you'll have a kid that's like so excited to get in there that they're like, and they're like running and trying to beat the other kid. Or sometimes they know somebody's just about to finish and they'll come and stand behind them creepily, and then the other kid's like, are you done? So you might want to say that. And then I'll give you the guideline sheet that I mentioned here. I'll send it out an email after everybody's done. All right, so who starts where and why? About a third of your kids in the inner circle, two-thirds in the outer circle. You can assign who starts in the inner circle, or you can let the kids choose. I've had equal success with both. Sometimes it's nice to have a couple of plants that are going to be, they're going to be great at discussion, and you want to have probably one or two of those in the first discussion so that the other kids know what a good comment sounds like. And those kids will probably naturally talk first anyway. Sometimes I let the kids pick, I don't know, so experiment with what works best for you. I don't have a great answer on that. So, who does what and how? The inner circle students and the outer circle students are going to be talking, and the outer circle students are going to be listening. And I listen and grade, so I try not to chime in. They should have those smooth, quiet transitions that we talked about. It takes about an hour for the actual discussion part. So with our schedule, you're probably going to have to break it up into 2 days, especially if you're doing it for the first time and you have to kind of train your kids. Now, once you have them trained, you can just say, we're doing Socratic Seminar, here's your prep sheet, who's going to be in the inner circle, go. So it does get a lot easier. You can vary that time. You can give them fewer chips, you can give them more chips, and that changes it too. I said you could break it into 2 days, do the Socratic prep sheet the day before. If you want to extend it, you want it to take a couple days, you could even do a verbal feedback session the next day or afterwards. I love to do that because I can kind of take some little notes and say, here are a couple of the great things that I saw during this discussion. Erin had that great comment about blah, 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 blah. And then Shannon had such a good question that really sparked discussion. And I'll intentionally try to call out the kids who don't get a lot of praise for other school things. So I'll try to kind of think about who needs a little lift and call them out. How do you wrap it up? So there are a couple different ways. You can let it naturally fizzle out. It's a little awkward at the end. It's usually like 2 or 3 quiet kids who are like, do I really have to talk? And then they're left in there together and they have to talk to each other because they're just sitting in there by themselves. So you can do that. Sometimes I allow them to go back in. So once everybody's been in, I say, okay, if anybody wants to go back in, you can, and they can just go and dump out the cup and talk a couple more times. But I do warn them to let those with the chips talk first. You can give a 5-minute warning. We've got 5 more minutes. If you still have chips left, you might want to make sure that you get your comments in so that you get those grades. Okay, so how do I grade it? You're probably wondering that because it's, So I assign point values for the different comment types, and the comment types are on your sheet. So you can decide the points however you want to do it, but I give full points for what I call an insightful comment. So they say something that's interesting, a nice meaty comment, right? It's a couple of sentences long, it's thoughtful. A good discussion question, and I always tell them a good discussion question is both asked and answered. So you ask it, then you answer it yourself, because it's going to have more than one answer, and that usually helps to clarify the question for the other students too, and then people are less afraid to answer the question. And then comments with text reference. That's especially important for me in an English class because I want them to reference the text. That might not be important for you. Or you could say comments with data or something like that. I give partial points for just a comment. If you say, yeah, I agree because that character was really smart. Right? Like, okay, at least you said something. I'm going to give you points. Right? A question, who is your favorite character? Right? Did that require a lot of thought? No. Probably the other kids are going to be like, no. But I'll give them a couple points because at least they talked. The goal of this is really to get people talking. You want them to get a good grade. We're not trying to get anybody with the points. No points or few points. Repeated comments. You weren't listening, so you said the exact same thing that somebody else did, or questions. And then, of course, no points if they don't talk. So, that's kind of hard sometimes. And I tell the students these categories ahead of time. I actually give them a handout with the categories and how much they're going to be worth so that they know ahead of time. And as the students are talking, I'm sitting up on my stool. Oh, it's over there. I'm sitting up on my stool with my roster, and I'm recording. IC, CT, Q, whatever it is. You look like you had a question.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay, and I might get to it. So print out a roster, or I have a chart that I'll give you, and then record that comment code. It's really very easy. It sounds like it would be hard, but you're just listening. And then I always say, if I don't quite hear a comment, maybe somebody says, can I go to the bathroom? I'm like, oh, I'm trying to listen to so-and-so. I just put IC. I give them the benefit of the doubt. They get points. I kind of know that that person was talking. I didn't quite hear what they said because something was going out on the hall or my mind left me for a minute. I just put down IC. And then I leave a column blank for the outer circle notes, which I do add to the grade. But you don't have to. You could just have them turn them in. And I don't allow them to see the scores during the seminar because that would be chaotic. When it's finished, I tally up the scores, which is really easy. Most of the time, they all get 100s, honestly. If I have a kid who's really just not trying, he's probably still talked, so you can add up his score. But most of the time, they all get a 100, and it's so easy to grade. It takes me maybe 10 minutes to add those up, and I put them directly in the grade book. I write the overall grade on the notes page so that they know what they got. Okay, what to do when? So this might answer some of your questions. So what do I do when a student is absent? Because that will happen. So I always have an alternate assignment prepared. Usually I take my essential questions and I have them answer each one in a paragraph. You want to make it kind of a pain in the rear because you don't want them to purposefully skip the seminar, especially if they're shy. But it also allows them to make it up, and I'm not trying to scramble and figure out what to do with them. You can't, if they don't talk, sometimes that happens. Very rarely. This has happened maybe 2 or 3 times total. You can let the grade stand if you've warned them multiple times. You can give them the alternate assignment. If they really have a lot of anxiety around it, you can say, hey, Diane, I know you were having such a hard time talking today. I'm going to give you the alternate assignment to do, and then next seminar, I want you to try harder to jump in, right? Because I know that Diane is a super quiet, sweet little girl, and she's just really going to have a tough time jumping into this seminar, but I want her to still practice those skills. And I do try to give those students ample warnings beforehand, and even during the discussion. Hey, we've got 5 minutes left. Diane, I see that you have 2 chips left. Make sure you jump into that discussion. Guys, can you make sure that Diane gets to speak? So I will kind of give them some openings. What if the discussion goes off the rails? Sometimes that happens. You can interrupt and you can redirect. Like, let's say you're talking about a novel and all of a sudden they start talking about, something totally different, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, this is not what we're talking about at all. You can remind the kids or prep them beforehand on the difference between a debate and an argument, right? A debate is good. It's respectful. It's productive. We are thinking, about different points of view. An argument is where you're just trying to win. You're just trying to yell out your point of view. So you don't want it to turn into an argument, right? If no one is talking, sometimes that happens, just wait. Just sit there. Someone will talk. The kids hate the silence even more than you do, right? Especially if they're in the inner circle. They're just looking at each other like, someone will talk. Sometimes I give them what I call CPR slips, to resuscitate the discussion. Get it? So it'll have general questions. They don't get any points for reading them, but it can pick the discussion up. Usually I don't need them. What if the kids forget to put their chips in? Sometimes that happens. You can give a quick, quiet reminder. You can use a hand gesture like this, right? I try not to interrupt the discussion unless I really have to. You can pause the discussion and give a gentle group reminder. Like if a lot of people are forgetting, you can say, pause for a second. Okay, guys, remember when you're finished with the comment, put your chips in. And then probably 2 or 3 kids are going to be like, oh, and put one in. Usually, if you just let it go, they'll remember. As soon as somebody else puts their chip in, they'll go, oh, I was supposed to, or the other kids sometimes will be like, put it in. But I try to do that as gently as possible. And if they forget and they do an extra comment, oh well, right? Who cares? If they struggle with depth of discussion, this does sometimes happen. I might pause it and talk about, remember, we're going to give a meaty comment. Sharon had such a great comment a minute ago. Remember when she asked about blah, 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 and she talked for a minute or two? That was a good meaty comment. So I might give an example. And then that also gives her a little bit of kudos too. You can adjust the essential question. You can, next time, bless you, you can stick in 2 to 3 really great discussion kids to kind of start it off on the right foot. Or you can even ask your own question and kind of steer the discussion back. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to give everybody this, and anything that is mine on Teachers Pay Teachers, I'm happy to give you. I don't think any of it really applies to most of you, but I have like a Socratic Seminar pack that I put together that has all this stuff, all the directions. You can adapt it to your own needs, so I'll send it out in an email. The only thing that I ask is that you don't post it online anywhere or like send it to people outside of Canterbury, but you can use it, you can adapt it, you can make it what you want. But it has all of those things, the alternate assignment, the prep sheet, the notes sheet, teacher instructions, the grading sheet, and you can kind of make it your own. And then I do have some for novels, but I don't think that would apply to anyone. So yeah, that's my little Socratic Seminar thing. What questions do you have? What are some questions that I can answer for you?
Have you ever done one without an inner circle?
I have with my seniors. Like with my seniors, I'll do this a couple times, and then they've got it enough that I can be more hands-off with discussion because they can measure out who's, if they're talking enough. So I have done it in that way. With my younger kids, I haven't, because it just devolves into a third of the class talking and 2/3 of the class just sitting there letting them talk.
Yeah, I was hoping you had some tips for that because I've only done it with the high school kids too. So.
I know. But the more we do this, the better they are at regulating themselves. Even in small groups, they can regulate themselves better. So it's kind of like the training wheels of those larger discussions that I have with seniors or maybe even juniors. But most of the time I start with this.
And when I was up north, I would sometimes handpick a group to be in the center that I knew was carrying on a really good conversation, and they could get it going, and then it, then as they left and someone else came in, I think they felt more comfortable instead of just putting, cold turkey in there in the center.
And a big difference too is that this is graded. So each person is accountable for their comments, and they have the chips that they can physically see their accountability.
So if you started it off without grading it, but just did a general to try to get.
And sometimes I've done that. I will tell them that I'm going to grade it, and then they don't do a great job, and I'll say, here's what you would have gotten. I'm not putting this in the grade book, but for the next discussion, it is going to be graded. This was a trial run. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to see. So I've done that sometimes, especially if the group is kind of struggling with it a little bit.
I've always traditionally handpicked that inner group first.
Yeah, and you could do that. It's as simple as just walking up and as they're working on their prep sheet, quietly placing the cups at a couple of tables.
Is there a minimum that doesn't?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Minimum amount?
Of kids total, I would say you need at least 4, ideally 5 kids in the middle. And then the outer circle, it doesn't really matter how many you have. 2 years ago, I had a really, really small group of one really small class that only had 5 kids in it total, and I couldn't make it work with that group. So that was too few. But it almost works better with a larger group because you have more people and ideas coming in. Yeah. 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 And you might be able to adapt it and say, we're all just going to be the inner circle. Like there is no outer circle notes, there is no moving to the outer circle, but everybody has chips and you can do it for the comments. And you might not even want to have it graded. It's just a way to measure out the comments for the discussion.
So much of what I do is performance-based.
Exactly.
So it is this.
Yeah.
For mine, it's the chips that allow my kids to only have so many comments.
Yes.
I have kids
your kids would love
They
this.
just
Yeah.
want to dominate. They just want to talk.
Yeah.
So it makes them actually have to make choices about what they're going to
Yes.
say.
Yeah, you have to save it for a quality comment. Yeah. Any other questions?
What do you think are the advantages of this over the traditional literature circle?
Well, I do
where
both.
there is a role ahead of time, that kind of
So I do literature circles in my classes. I do small group discussions. I do fishbowl discussions. I do just the Wild West, let's all talk about the topic things. This is the one that I, grade individually. So I like that aspect of it. And I also think it's valuable to have them speak in a large group to get that practice, because it is hard to, put your ideas out in front of a group of people. And it's also hard to listen and not interrupt. And I think this helps them to learn to do that in a way that's harder to do in a literature circle. I usually do this first a couple times, and then I do literature circles later, and that seems to help my literature circles. So that makes sense. Good question, though. Okay. Well, I will send out the email that has all those resources in it for you. It'll also have this handout and the presentation. And of course, many thanks to Javier for taping it so that you can access it later, or if anybody else missed it, you can see it there. And then I'll let you know when we decide what our next topic is for November, and we can all see you back again for that. So, thank you.
Erin.